back, hosers. Today, as promised, we are going to talk about propagating carnivorous plants. So you've got one or two, or let's face it, it's a sickness. You've got several, but you want more. We're going to go over how to make more Venus flytraps or sundews or pitcher plants happen in your life without going out and buying more. Now, because you may only be interested in propagating one of these types of plants, I am going to split this into chapters. And just to be safe, I'm going to list when each chapter starts down in the description, because this is going to be the first video I've intentionally chaptered, and I'm not sure how well it's going to work. So I'm going to do you a solid and make sure you got something to go on to get to the information you're most interested in. Now also, because I have not done all of these things I'm going to talk about, and of the things I'm going to talk about, I haven't done all of them successfully, I'm going to make sure I link to other videos from other YouTubers down in the description as well, so that this can be, if necessary, just your first stop on a journey of discovery as you figure out how to propagate carnivorous plants. Now, before we get down into the nitty-gritty of each plant and how to propagate it, I do want to talk a little bit about substrate. In a previous video I already did, I talked about doing a 2:1:1 ratio of peat moss and perlite and sand. And of course you're going to want to moisten that with distilled or reverse osmosis or rainwater, not tap water or well water. And so I have already covered that. On a comment on the previous video, I had a guy asking, what about coconut coir? Because coconut coir is the environmentally sustainable alternative to peat moss, and I'd really rather use that. And I'm like, yes, thank you. I love that there's less habitat destruction going on because people are using coconut coir instead of peat moss where they're able to. However, coconut coir has some issues when it comes to carnivorous plants. Carnivorous plants need a substrate with a low salt content, or low total dissolved solids if you're measuring your salts that way. And coconuts grow near the ocean, typically. That's what they've evolved to do. That's what coconuts, the seeds, are for. They're flotation devices to use the ocean to distribute their seeds around beautiful tropical sunny and warm archipelagos. And because of that, coconut coir will tend to have a pretty high salt content. And that's not the worst part, because if it had a reliably high salt content, we could be like, yeah, you gotta rinse it this much. But it has a high and variable salt content, which means you don't know. You don't know unless you've got a total dissolved solids meter if you've rinsed it enough to make it safe for your carnivorous plants. So, in this case, to make your lives easier, I am recommending peat moss, sphagnum peat moss, as part of your substrate. But if you are hardcore about saving the environment and you are willing to go out and invest in a TDS meter and do the 4 to 10 washes with distilled water that it takes to get that cleaned out, more power to you. I respect that. Another thing I want to get out of the way as we talk about propagation is that we are going to be doing asexual or vegetative propagation methods and sexual propagation methods, and you're going to want to use those depending on the results that you want. Like if you are wanting to cross two plants, of course you're going to do sexual propagation. You're going to do a little cross-pollination and collect the seeds and propagate that way. Vegetative or asexual propagation will get you clones. In every case, you'll always just get a clone of the plant that you're propagating, or ideally several clones of the plant that you're propagating. So just want to make sure that that is clear. Anything that's not from seed that I talk about today is going to be vegetative propagation, and you are essentially cloning. You're building your own little clone army of carnivorous plants so that you can be your own little carnivorous plant emperor Palpatine and have a great time. Now, the first plant that we're going to start with is going to be Venus flytraps, just because they are among the most popular carnivorous plants. So if you're here for the Venus flytraps, you don't have to skip ahead to another chapter. You can propagate these from seeds. The downside is that the seeds are tiny. They're like dust. And so that's where I have failed, is I can pollinate my flowers just fine. They're perfect flowers. They have the male parts and the female parts all on the same flower. So you just go around with your little Q-tip and go boop, 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 and tickle them all. And then presumably you're getting some seeds set, but I can't find them. So if you're really, really patient, or you've got like, I just had LASIK surgery last year, and so I can't see things up close anymore. I see far away really well. So if you have really, really good near vision, that might be something you're better at. And to propagate from seeds, once you've got your flowers pollinated and you've developed your little seed pods and you've got your little seeds out, you're just going to want to sprinkle those over a layer of substrate and wait for them to germinate. I would recommend keeping it very wet and keeping a humidity dome over your substrate while you're waiting for the Venus flytrap seeds to germinate. Once they've germinated, you can allow things to start drying out a little bit more, and it's going to take a few years, 2 to 3 years, to get to physical maturity. So it's going to take a little bit of time, and for a while you're going to have some teensy weensy adorable little traps, and it's going to be cute and you're going to love them, and if you don't, you shouldn't have propagated from seed. The other way that you can propagate, so we're getting into the vegetative or cloning methods now, the easiest way that I've done and had success with is bulb division. So at the base of the the Venus flytrap, you're going to have these little white, they look almost like onions, because kind of they are, except don't eat them. They're not tasty. And you'll see sometimes your more mature plants will have a cluster of these. As long as they all have roots, you can kind of split them off and boom, it's its own plant now. So you're going to want to nestle that down into some substrate that we've already talked about and give it some time. Maybe keep it in a raised humidity environment until you see that it's established and doing well. I've never actually done that, and I've still had great success. So that is bulb division. Another way you can propagate Venus flytraps is leaf cuttings, although that is kind of a misleading term because you're not cutting the leaves off, you're pulling them off. And you want to pull, so you got your plants coming up in the rosette, you got your leaves kind of spreading out. You want to pull down towards those little onion bulb looking things, and ideally you want the stem to come off with a little bit of white on it. And that white is where your new baby Venus flytrap is going to form. And you're going to, you can either drop your pulled leaf in water, distilled water, and let it root and start growing that way, or you can put it in substrate, and I would just nestle it down and just kind of press it onto the substrate. You don't really have to bury it. Make sure it's getting lots of light, it's staying humid. You will definitely want a humidity dome for that. And if everything goes well, you're going to see a cute little rosette of new little traps growing up out of that white tissue at the stem of the leaf. And that white tissue would be meristematic tissue, which is where plants keep their undifferentiated or stem cells, which is why we can propagate from there. You'll also see stem cells sometimes in the roots of some plants, and you'll be able to find stem cells in the flower stalks of some plants or meristematic tissue. And that's why those are like the best places to take cuttings. I have heard that you can take cuttings from flower stalks of Venus flytraps, but I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to talk about it. So that is your Venus flytraps. You can do from seed, do bulb divisions, which are very easy and relatively painless, and you can do leaf cuttings. And between those, you should have an endless supply of Venus flytraps now. Now, the next plant we're going to talk about in this video, mostly because it's just a really easy plant to propagate and quite rewarding, and you'll do it accidentally whether you like it or not, and maybe you're wondering, how did I end up with all of these Sundews, is of course the sundew. I think both of them that I've propagated are African Sundews. So I've got the little prostrate rosette ones that are a deep, almost bloody red, and I'm pretty sure that they've self-propagated from seed. And then additionally I've propagated Cape Sundews from root cuttings. Now, to propagate from seed with Sundews is quite easy. They seem to germinate more readily than the other carnivorous plants. I mean, really, if you think about it, Sundews are like the weediest of the carnivorous plants. They want to grow no matter what. They're gonna do their best, and so you're gonna have success with them. To propagate from seed works pretty similarly to how you would do the Venus flytrap, except I've had success without even trying to maintain a humid environment. You're going to want to sprinkle your seeds onto wet substrate, and then they'll just go. Tickle the flowers with a Q-tip if you want. Some flowers seem to be self-fertile, others may not be. So depending on the species of sundew that you're propagating from seed, you may or may not need to get in there and help them out. Once they have formed their little seed pods and you've collected that and scattered it over your substrate, you should be good to go. No problem there. And also, unlike the Venus flytraps or pitcher plants, sundews will grow to full maturity in a year or less. So if you're growing from seed, you're going to get a lot of plants. They're all going to be genetically different, which is cool because you can breed for desirable traits, and it's fast. Now you can also grow from cuttings, and you can use, well, if you are growing annual sundews or sundews that live a year, flower, and then die, you're only going to propagate from seed. But all the rest, you can cut almost any type of tissue off of these plants and get baby sundews, well, clones. So you can take flower stalk cuttings and root those. You can take leaf cuttings and root those, or you can even take root cuttings. And I mean, technically they're already rooted, but they'll go. They'll go. They'll grow new plants. So to the flower stalk or the leaf cuttings, you're going to cut off the leaf near the base or the flower stalk near the base and just gently press it into moist substrate. Throw a humidity dome over that and wait for it to grow new plants. You can also just drop them directly into distilled water and wait for some roots and leaves to develop before transplanting them out into substrate. It should happen pretty readily because sundews are amazing. Also, you can grow, if you have a species of sundew like the Cape sundew that has thick fibrous roots, so you're going to give a little tug on that root, and instead of shredding apart, it's going to be, it's like fiber. It's like that coconut coir we wish we could use with carnivorous plants more. So if you've got thick fibrous roots, you're going to break off some of that root, put it in its own pot of substrate, and you're going to get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 new plants out of that, as long as you keep the substrate moist. And that's how I've propagated my Cape sundew, is entirely from root cuttings. I think it might be the easiest way for me. You do you. Also, some species of sundews propagate from runners or stolons. So a stolon is kind of like a horizontal stem, and wherever it touches soil, you're going to get more plants. Common examples of plants that propagate from stolons are strawberries and spider plants. So if you have experience with either of those, that's what you'll be looking for. It'll be kind of obvious that that's what's going on. It took me by surprise when one of my sundews started propagating from stolons. But, you know, I bought one, now I have 5. I didn't put any effort in, and I think it's the least painful for the plant if you've got one that goes from stolons. It's not going to be as numerous as what you could get from leaf cuttings or root cuttings or flower stalk cuttings. You're not going to get as many new plants all at once, but you can get them that way with some species. And you probably won't know if you've got a species that propagates from stolons until you see those stolons coming out. But now you know what they are. Just wait for the plantlets to develop their own root systems before you sever that link with the mother plant, or else they could die. And that is a pretty good summary of sundew propagation. It's the type of plant with the most ways to propagate, and so it could sound the most intimidating because you're like, which way am I gonna do it? Don't do that. Don't be intimidated. So instead of seeing like all these details, just see it as options. I mean, basically, you're gonna get new plants. Whether you try or not, you're gonna get new plants if you have a sundew. And this is all the ways that it could happen. So enjoy growing your sundews. And then next up is pitcher plants. Specifically Sarracenia, or the American pitcher plant. I don't have experience with the tropical pitcher plants. So if you are propagating those, I'll find someone who's doing their own video on that. Everything that I'm talking about, whether or not I've had success with it in this video, I have at least researched it, and I'm pretty sure it's good information. Now, if you are propagating your pitcher plants from seed, that is definitely a thing you can do. In fact, I just ordered some seeds. I got them from Rare Seeds, or Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. So they're rareseeds.com, and the company is Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. And I usually get vegetable seeds through them, but I saw that they had pitcher plant seeds, and it was an assortment of American pitcher plant varieties, some of them hybrids. And so it's basically like a little packet of Pokemon cards. You don't know what you're gonna get, and I couldn't help it. I had to get them. To propagate pitcher plants from seed, you're going to want to cold stratify them. The Sarracenia need cold stratification. To do that, you're going to wrap them in a paper towel that has been dampened with distilled water. You're going to put it in some sort of sealable container. If you do that, it's less likely to dry out than if you keep them in a plastic bag, and you're going to put them in the fridge. And I recommend that you put a label on that says what it is and when it can come out. So do your pulling out of the fridge date right on there so you don't forget, because it's going to be like 4 to 6 weeks. I'd go 6 in the fridge, and I don't know about you, but I forget about stuff after a while. Now, once you've cold stratified your Sarracenia seeds, your pitcher plant seeds, you're going to take them out. You're going to scatter them over your very wet substrate, and you're going to put a humidity dome over that, and you are going to give it lots of light, and it is going to take more weeks, another 4 to 6 to 8 weeks to germinate. They're a very slow plant. Now, pollinating your pitcher plant to get seeds is not going to be as straightforward as it is with a Venus flytrap or a sundew, because while pitcher plants do also have a perfect flower, which means that it has the boy parts and the girl parts all on the same flower, they're kind of funky. I think pitcher plant flowers are beautiful, and I love them, and I think they're just absolutely elegant in their form. But it's difficult to know what to do with that pollen once you've collected it on your Q-tip. So I've taken some pictures. They're going to see them come up. It's easy to find the stamen, or where the pollen is, because that looks like it's supposed to. And in fact, the stamen are quite large, and they produce prolific amounts of pollen. And it will even, because the flower points down and then the petals just kind of droop, when you reach inside, the pollen will even have collected inside of the shield that's over the front of the flower. Now that shield is your pistil, where you want the pollen to go, but it's not there yet, even so. You'll notice it kind of divides into a 5-sectioned umbrella. It looks like an umbrella, and it's got the 5 points. Each of those points is where you can deposit the pollen to pollinate the flower. So you're going to go from flower to flower if you have multiple flowers, and heck, I would, because that's more diversity. If you just have the one flower, don't worry, you can pollinate that too. You're going to scoop up some of that pollen from inside the flower, and you take it up to the point and tickle that gently with your Q-tip, and that should pollinate your flower. I learned this when it was too late. So I'm probably not going to have seeds from my existing Sarracenias because I saw the little dimple on the bottom, and so I thought, oh, this is brilliant. This is a mechanism to prevent self-pollination because it's shielding the pistil from the pollen, but no, that actually doesn't make sense. If you think about it from the perspective of a pollinator, why is it going to want to go there? So I was poking my pollen in that little dimple in the center of the pistil that does nothing. It's just a feature that does nothing. Propagation from seed is the hardest with pitcher plants. It is time consuming, but I tried the other way. I tried from rhizome division, and I'm not sure it worked. I think I might just have wound up with a smaller plant. So pitcher plants have a horizontal component, the rhizome, that sits on top of the soil. And you'll notice that all of the pitchers kind of grow up out of that, and the roots grow down out of that. A common example of a plant that grows like that would be irises. You like irises, and you've probably propagated irises by dividing their rhizome. Well, that's how you can vegetatively propagate pitcher plants, American pitcher plants. I'm not talking about the other ones. We already talked about that. So, for rhizome division on your pitcher plant, you want both sections to have roots, and you're going to take a sharp, clean knife and you're going to cut them off. You're going to bury the roots in now 2 pots, or if you can cut them into 3 sections, 3 pots. However many sections you can get, that's how many pots you use. Just make sure each section has roots and at least 1 or 2 little buds that could form leaves on it, and you should be good to go. They're slow plants. They grow so slowly. I did try this method. I know that at least one of my rhizome sections has survived and has put out so far 1 tiny little leaf, and I haven't seen any activity from the other sections yet, so I don't know how successful I was. I did 4 or 5 sections off of a plant with a longer rhizome. I had 3 of the same plant, and I thought, let's give this a try, and if I lose it, if I mess it up and I lose it, it's not going to be so awful. And I honestly can't tell you whether or not it worked yet, because pitcher plants grow so slowly. They're so beautiful though. I totally understand why you want to grow them. And I've been loving mine. So anyway, that's how you propagate pitcher plants. You're pretty much limited to, as far as I know, from seed or rhizome divisions. Now there could be other ways to propagate this, and if there are, I would love for you to let me know in the comments so that I can continue to learn with you. I do hope that this has been informative for you. Before I end the video though, there is one more thing I want to talk about, and that is dormancy. You'll notice that your Venus flytraps and your pitcher plants both need a period of dormancy. In my home, because I grow them in my windowsill, the way that I accomplish it is that it just gets cold by my windowsill in the winter and they go dormant, which is quite handy. If you live somewhere warmer, or you have better windows in your house that don't let them get so cold in the winter, you may have to put your Venus flytrap or your pitcher plant somewhere else that's cold, or maybe even in your refrigerator for a few weeks. Now, while the adult pitcher plants require dormancy, you can get away with not doing a dormancy period for your young, like less than a year or two old pitcher plants if you need to. So if you've just started from seed and fall has arrived and you don't think these plants are mature enough to survive a season in your garage or your refrigerator or wherever you need to put them to get them dormant, just don't. You'll be fine. Now, if you did like this video and found it informative, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel and like the video. I am thirsty for your subscriptions. Now also, I do want to warn you, as you subscribe to my channel, it's not all carnivorous plants. I'm mostly a gardener, and I grow carnivorous plants as part of my indoor gardening because I just can't stop growing plants. So if you subscribe to my channel, you will not get like 100% carnivorous plants all the time. Like, I think my next video might have to be about propagating some of these ornamentals. Like I got these Delosperma right here, or ice plants, and these are so easy to propagate. So I paid, it says right on here, $8. I paid $8 for this pot, but you know what? I can probably get like 20 or 50 plants off this before I plant it out. So if you want to know how to save money on ground cover plants, subscribe to my channel. If you want to watch me struggle to grow tomatoes because it gets so cold here at night, even in summer, subscribe to my channel. If you want to see whether or not my deer fence actually excludes deer from my vegetable garden, subscribe to my channel. If in the winter you want me to do more videos about carnivorous plants, don't worry, I will. That's all that's going on in the winter in my house. Subscribe to my channel. Alright, so that's the content you can expect. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and wherever you garden, indoors or out, I hope you have a great time gardening.